My fiancé dumped me months before our wedding because his mom said I wasn't good enough. You're nothing without my son. He can do so much better, she hissed. I just laughed and left. Now she calls me 10 times a day, sobbing and begging me to take back her broke, miserable son. I still can't believe I'm typing this out. 3 months ago, I was planning what should have been the happiest day of my life with Brett, my partner of 3 years. Today, I'm living in my best friend's spare bedroom, scrolling through apartment listings and trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Brett and I met in 2021. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. After a year and a half, we moved in together. When Brett first introduced me to his parents, his dad, Walt, seemed pleasant enough, if a bit quiet. Susan, on the other hand, spent the entire dinner quizzing me about my background and family connections, with a weird tight smile that never reached her eyes. I remember mentioning that my dad worked in construction and my mom was a school aide, and watching Susan's expression sour slightly before she quickly masked it. Brett brushed it off later, saying she was just protective and old-fashioned. His exact words were that she came from a family that valued certain connections, but that he didn't care about that stuff. I believed him, because love makes you stupid sometimes. When Brett proposed last year, I was over the moon. He did it during a weekend trip to a cute little B&B upstate. We agreed on a medium-sized wedding, nothing extravagant, since we were both saving for a house down payment. The problem started almost immediately after we announced our engagement. Susan insisted on being involved in every single detail. At first, it seemed helpful. She had connections with vendors and offered to help coordinate since I worked long hours. But it quickly became obvious she was taking over. The venue I loved was too shabby. The catering I wanted was not the kind of food served at their family events. The dress I fell in love with was a bit cheap-looking, don't you think? Brett kept saying it was easier to just go along with her suggestions than fight her on everything. I reluctantly agreed to compromise on some things to keep the peace. But it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Every decision taken away from me chipped at my excitement, until wedding planning felt more like a chore than a celebration. The real turning point came during a dinner at their house about 2 months before the wedding. Susan had invited her friends, Rita and Angela, over. I realized halfway through that I was basically being paraded in front of them for approval. They kept exchanging little glances whenever I spoke. At one point, Rita asked where I summered as a child. I laughed, thinking she was joking. When I explained that my family's idea of vacation was camping at the state park or visiting my grandma in Ohio, the table went silent. After dinner, Susan cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping clean up. She started with what seemed like casual conversation about Brett's ex-girlfriend, Melissa, who apparently came from some influential family with a vacation home in the Hamptons. Then she mentioned how Brett had always been destined for great things and how she hoped I wouldn't hold him back. I felt like I'd been slapped. When I asked her what she meant by that, she dropped all pretense. She told me that while I seemed nice enough, I clearly wasn't from the right sort of background to help Brett's future. She said my lack of refinement would eventually embarrass him in important circles. She said I wouldn't know how to entertain properly or make the right connections. I was so shocked I couldn't even respond at first. When I finally told her she was being incredibly rude, she laughed. It was this condescending little laugh. She said my defensiveness proved her point. She told me Brett deserved someone who could match his potential, not drag him down. I walked out of the kitchen and told Brett we needed to leave immediately. In the car, I was shaking as I told him everything his mother had said. I expected outrage, anger on my behalf. Instead, he got quiet. He said she didn't mean it like that. He said she was just worried about our future. He asked if maybe I had misunderstood her tone. That night was our first major fight. I couldn't believe he was defending her behavior. He eventually admitted that his mother had been expressing concerns about our compatibility for months. Apparently, she'd been filling his head with doubts. The worst part was that he was actually listening to her. Over the next 2 weeks, things deteriorated rapidly. Brett became distant and started staying late at work. When he was home, he brought up concerns that had never existed before. Things like whether our different backgrounds would cause problems raising kids, or whether I'd be comfortable at his company events. It all came to a head when Susan invited us over for another dinner, supposedly to clear the air. Brett practically begged me to go, saying she wanted to apologize. Like an idiot, I believed him. There was no apology. Susan spent the entire evening making backhanded comments about my clothes, my table manners, even the way I spoke. When Brett stepped outside to take a phone call, she leaned across the table and said, with chilling certainty, that I was nothing without her son. She said he could do so much better than me. She told me I should walk away before I ruined his life with my ordinariness. When I started crying, she rolled her eyes. She said my emotional behavior proved her point about my lack of composure. When Brett came back, I was gathering my things to leave. Susan put on a concerned face and told him I had overreacted to some gentle advice. I was done. In the car, I told Brett exactly what happened. I told him he needed to choose. Either we cut contact with his mother until she could respect me, or the wedding was off. He didn't choose me. Instead, he said maybe his mother was right. Maybe we were rushing into things. Maybe we came from two different worlds. I took off my engagement ring and placed it on the dashboard. I told him to drop me at Angela's place. He didn't even try to stop me. The next day, while Brett was at work, I packed most of my things from our apartment. I left my key and a note saying I would arrange to get the rest of my stuff later. I blocked his mother's number immediately. I kept Brett unblocked, just in case he came to his senses. He texted a few days later with a pathetic message about how he was confused and needed time to think. I replied that there was nothing to think about. Either he was willing to build a life with me based on love and respect, or he wasn't. His response was that maybe we should take a break until after his big work project was finished, and then reassess. That was my answer. 3 years together, and he couldn't even properly break up with me. He just wanted to keep me hanging on while he reassessed. I told him not to contact me again. According to mutual friends, Brett has been telling people we mutually decided to call off the wedding due to different life goals. Meanwhile, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. Yesterday, I got a voicemail from Susan. I don't know how she got my new number. She was sniffling and asking if we could talk about Brett. I didn't listen to the whole thing before deleting it. Whatever drama is happening in their perfect little world isn't my problem anymore. I know this was long, but I needed to get it off my chest. The wedding would have been next weekend. Instead, I'm taking myself on a solo trip to a beach rental I found on Airbnb. Not the honeymoon I imagined, but maybe exactly the fresh start I need. First update. First of all, thank you so much for all the support on my original post. The first month after the breakup was honestly a blur. I stayed on Angela's pull-out couch longer than I planned. She's literally a saint. Every morning, I'd wake up disoriented, reaching for Brett before remembering everything that happened. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 10 pounds without trying. Angela started leaving protein bars on the coffee table because I kept forgetting to eat. I spent a lot of time staring at apartment listings without actually calling anyone. Something about making that move felt so final. Angela never pressured me, but after about 3 weeks, she gently suggested we go look at a place that had just opened up in her friend's building. The apartment was nothing special. It was a small one-bedroom with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it was within my budget and only a 15-minute drive from work. I signed the lease the same day. Moving in was another hurdle. I'd left most of my furniture behind at Brett's place because I couldn't deal with arranging movers while feeling like an emotional wreck. Angela and her boyfriend helped me pick up the essentials from IKEA. A bed, a small couch, a dining table that doubled as my desk. The apartment stayed pretty sparse for weeks. I just couldn't muster the energy to make it feel like home. Work became my lifeline. I arrived early, left late, and volunteered for extra projects just to avoid sitting alone in my empty apartment. My team lead noticed and started giving me more responsibilities, coordinating with other departments, training the new hire. It felt good to be needed, to be valued. About 2 months after the breakup, I ran into Nick, Brett's brother, at the grocery store. I almost hid behind the cereal display when I saw him, but he spotted me first. He approached me, looking genuinely uncomfortable. He told me he was sorry about what happened and that he'd argued with his mom about how she treated me. It was awkward, but weirdly validating to hear someone from Brett's family acknowledge that I'd been wronged. That's when I first heard that things weren't going great for Brett. I thanked Nick for the apology but kept the conversation brief. I wasn't ready to be pulled back into that world, even peripherally. A week later, my old college roommate invited me to a party. I almost didn't go. Angela practically pushed me out the door, insisting I needed to remember how to be a person again. She was right, though I'd never admit it to her face. That party was where I met Matt. He was my roommate's cousin, visiting from out of town. We ended up in the same conversation circle, talking about random things. He asked for my number at the end of the night. I surprised myself by giving it to him. Our first date was coffee on a Sunday afternoon. Low pressure. Casual. He was easy to talk to. For the first time in months, I went hours without thinking about Brett. Matt works in a completely different field than Brett. He lives in a modest apartment similar to mine. He has a refreshingly normal family that doesn't care about summer homes or making the right connections. When I told him about my breakup, the condensed version, he just listened. He didn't try to fix anything or offer platitudes. Around 3 months after the breakup, an unexpected opportunity came up at work. My company was restructuring and creating a new team. They needed someone to take on more responsibility. My extra effort over the previous months hadn't gone unnoticed. My manager encouraged me to apply, though she warned me the position would involve longer hours and more stress. I almost didn't go for it. My confidence was still shaky, but I figured I had nothing to lose. The interview process was grueling. 3 rounds with various department heads. A presentation I stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting. A final meeting with upper management. I honestly didn't think I'd get it. There were other candidates with more experience. 2 weeks later, my manager called me into her office and offered me the position. The promotion came with a significant raise. It meant I could finally stop stressing about making rent each month. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to start rebuilding my emergency fund, which had been depleted during the breakup chaos. I was still processing the news when I ran into Rita, Susan's gossipy friend, at the mall. I was shopping for professional clothes for my new role when she spotted me coming out of a store. She acted overly friendly, as if we'd ever been close. After some awkward small talk, she dropped what felt like carefully planned information. Brett had lost his job. Apparently, the big project he'd been working on, the same one he used as an excuse when asking for a break, had fallen apart spectacularly. Something about missed deadlines and poor management. Rita watched my reaction closely, so I kept my face neutral. She continued, clearly enjoying herself. Brett had been let go and was struggling to find his footing. She also mentioned, with poorly disguised glee, that Melissa had briefly rekindled things with him after our breakup. It lasted only a few weeks before ending again. Rita winked and suggested I'd dodged a bullet. Later that week, I had another strange encounter. Matt and I were having dinner at a new restaurant downtown when I spotted Susan across the room. She was with Walt and another couple I didn't recognize. Our eyes met briefly, and I quickly looked away. My heart started racing. I expected her to ignore me, or give me one of her famous cold stares. Instead, she approached our table. She greeted me like we were old friends, commenting on how wonderful I looked. She asked about my new job, how she even knew about that, I don't know. She complimented my outfit. Matt looked confused, but polite as I awkwardly introduced him. Susan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly when she realized I was on a date, but she maintained her friendly facade. Before leaving, she mentioned that everyone missed me and hoped we could catch up properly someday. I gave a non-committal response. When I explained who she was, Matt took it in stride. He just said she seemed intense. The weirdness didn't stop there. About a week later, Angela forwarded me a Facebook message she'd received from Brett. He asked how I was doing and if I was seeing anyone. Angela hadn't responded, knowing I wouldn't want her sharing details of my life. I was grateful for her loyalty, but unsettled by his sudden interest. Through mutual friends, I learned more about Brett's situation. After losing his job, he'd moved back in with his parents. The perfect life Susan envisioned for him was crumbling. From what I heard, she was not handling it well. I tried not to think about them. My relationship with Matt was progressing naturally. No rush. Just genuine connection. We'd been seeing each other for about 2 months. He came over regularly, helping me make my apartment feel more like home. We installed shelves for my books one weekend. Hung artwork the next. Small touches that made the space feel less temporary. My new position at work was challenging but fulfilling. Some days, I came home completely drained, questioning if I was up to the task. Overall, though, I was proud of myself. My team respected me. I was finally starting to believe I deserved the opportunity. Then last Friday, everything shifted again. As I was leaving work, my phone buzzed with a notification. A voicemail from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But something made me listen. It was Susan. Her voice was thick with tears. She said she'd been trying to reach me. She needed to talk to me about Brett. She said he wasn't doing well. That she'd made a terrible mistake. That she'd do anything to fix things between us. 6 months ago, this woman told me I was nothing without her son. Now she was practically begging for my help. I didn't call her back. Instead, I went to Matt's place as planned, but the voicemail replayed in my head all night. Matt noticed something was off and asked what was wrong. When I told him, he didn't tell me what to do. He didn't offer solutions. He just asked what I wanted. What would give me peace? I woke up the next morning to 3 missed calls from Susan and a text from an unknown number. I assumed it was Brett's new phone. I haven't opened it yet. I guess my question now is, do I engage at all? Final update. So, it's been about a month since my last update, and I need to vent because things have gotten weird. Like, uncomfortably weird. When I last posted, Susan had left me a tearful voicemail, and I wasn't sure whether to respond. After debating for 3 days, I finally decided to text Brett's number, the unknown one, with a simple message asking what was going on. I figured texting was safer than calling. Easier to disengage if things got uncomfortable. Within 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was Susan. Not Brett. Apparently, she'd been using his phone to contact me since I'd blocked her number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. That was my first mistake. The Susan on the phone was nothing like the cold, judgmental woman I remembered. Her voice was shaky, almost desperate. She started by asking how I was doing and commented on how well I looked when she saw me at the restaurant, which was still creepy. Then she launched into what I can only describe as the most uncomfortable apology I've ever received. She admitted she'd been terrible to me, that she'd misjudged me based on superficial things, that she regretted driving me away. I sat there in stunned silence as she kept talking. She said Brett had been lost since our breakup, that he spiraled after losing his job, that he was drinking too much, that he'd made bad financial decisions. When I finally asked why she was telling me all of this, her answer made my skin crawl. She said she thought I could help him recover, because I was such a stabilizing influence. She actually said Brett needs someone responsible like me right now. The audacity of this woman, to go from telling me I wasn't good enough to deciding I was exactly what her son needed when things got tough. I told her calmly that I was sorry Brett was struggling, but we'd been over for months. I mentioned that I was seeing someone else. Her response was dismissive. She said rebound relationships rarely last and that Brett and I had real history. Then she asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss the situation further. Against my better judgment and Matt's concerned look when I told him I agreed. I told myself it would give me closure. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Susan was already there. She looked noticeably different. Her hair was pulled back in a rushed ponytail. Her makeup was minimal. She looked tired. She'd ordered my favorite drink, a detail that was both thoughtful and deeply unsettling, because it meant Brett had told her. The next hour was surreal. Susan laid out Brett's downfall in excruciating detail. After losing his job, he'd tried to maintain his lifestyle while job hunting, quickly draining his savings. He made a bad investment in a friend's startup that went nowhere. He maxed out 2 credit cards. Now he was living in his childhood bedroom, sleeping until noon, barely applying for jobs. Throughout all of it, she never directly asked me to take Brett back. Instead, she said things like, "He was at his best when he was with you. You always motivated him. He listens to you in a way he never listens to me." When I reminded her that she once thought I wasn't good enough for her son, she teared up. She said she'd protected him from the wrong things, that she should have valued my steadiness more than Melissa's connections. I almost laughed. Suddenly, I was steady instead of boring, responsible instead of lacking ambition. I left feeling hollow. I'd expected satisfaction seeing Susan brought low, but mostly I felt pity mixed with lingering anger. I told her I'd think about talking to Brett, but made no promises. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The calls started the very next day. Susan called to follow up, then called again to say Brett had asked about me, then called to mention a job opening she thought Brett might qualify for, asking if my company was hiring. Every single day, I started letting the calls go to voicemail. The messages got more desperate. She mentioned Brett's father threatening to cut him off financially. She talked about family friends asking uncomfortable questions. She even brought up my parents, saying she'd love to make amends with them too. Then Nick texted me. He apologized again for his mother's behavior and told me Brett's spiral had been worse than I knew. Apparently, Brett had started drinking heavily after our breakup, which contributed to his poor performance at work. Nick was clear about one thing. None of this was my responsibility. Meanwhile, things with Matt were getting more serious. He was calm, supportive, and never pressured me. We even started talking about possibly moving in together when his lease ended. The contrast between his stability and Brett's chaos wasn't lost on me. Then Susan crossed a line. She showed up at my workplace. I was walking to my car when I saw her waiting in the parking lot, clutching a folder, Brett's resume. She asked if I could put in a good word for him. I was furious. I told her firmly that this was inappropriate and that she needed to stop contacting me. She broke down crying right there in the parking lot. Several coworkers witnessed the scene. It was humiliating. Later that week, Brett finally reached out himself. He sent a long message apologizing for his mother, for the breakup, for not standing up for me. Reading it, I felt nothing. No anger. No longing. Just exhaustion. Susan didn't give me space to process. She called again the next morning asking if I'd read Brett's message and what I thought. That's when something in me snapped. I told her I was blocking her number. That if she contacted me at work again, I'd report it as harassment. That Brett was an adult and needed to solve his own problems. Then I blocked her. That evening, I responded to Brett. I told him I forgave him, not for him, but for myself. I made it clear there was no future for us. I wished him well and asked him not to contact me again. I blocked his number too. The next day, Susan messaged me on Instagram from a new account. Then emails. Then a handwritten letter. The final straw came last weekend. There was a knock at my door. It was Brett, disheveled, drunk, with Susan hovering behind him. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. I told Brett this was inappropriate and that I meant what I said about moving on. For the first time, he turned to his mother and told her this was exactly why he didn't want to come. He apologized to me, not for the breakup, but for not protecting me. I haven't heard from either of them since. Nick texted once to say he was taking Brett to his first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I thanked him and didn't ask for updates. Matt and I are going away for a weekend trip soon. I've changed my email and alerted my manager. Life goes on. And, surprisingly, it's better than I ever imagined when I was planning a wedding to the wrong person. I don't know if I'll post another update.